Hello and welcome to Nerdarchy for Nerds by Nerds. I'm Nerdicus Dave. Today we're hanging out with No Fun Allowed over on here on the YouTubes. How are you doing today?
Oh, I'm fan freaking tastic.
Awesome. So, just for folks that may not be familiar with what you do, if you want to just kind of give them the elevator pitch and then introduce yourself real fast.
Yeah, so I'm No Fun Allowed. I cover D&D modules, how to GM series. I do interviews with awesome content creators in our community, and I just go over, the basic generic stuff of how to play the game and what to look out for.
So that's a bold claim there with no fun allowed. I'm sure someone somewhere, some way along the road, somebody has some fun. How do you guarantee no fun?
So the thing about having no fun is I go to all my players and say, "Hey, what do you guys want out of the game?" And then I don't deliver on that. No. So the TLDR by my name is I was I was telling my friends, okay, I'm gonna do a YouTube channel, and they've been pushing me to do it, so I finally buckled, and I was pitching out different names. I had things like Save or Die, I had a huge laundry list of things, and
Yeah.
the funny thing was I had this big laundry list, and I went to each individual person and said, "Hey, what should my name be?" And they all universally agreed that it should be No Fun Allowed. So it wasn't me that picked my name; it was my players that picked my
Okay.
name.
Blame your friends when all else fails. And was there any inspiration for that particular name? Like, did you use
There,
a random name generator? How did you
no,
come?
it's been I all my names that I had listed were things that my players had either told me or things I should I was kind of
Okay.
considering, but it's been a meme in some of my games where my players bang the table and say no fun allowed, no fun allowed whenever I don't allow a certain thing, when my players are trying to do something out of the realm of possibility and I say no, you can't do that. So unfortunate.
That is a great. That's a great name. I like that. I like the fact that they're chanting "No fun allowed" at your table.
Yeah, you got to live with it, right? You got to embrace the meme.
Gotta embrace it. So, how long have you been YouTubing now?
I have been YouTubing for just over 7 months now. I when I first started, I had a catalog of videos because I wanted to ensure that I could pump out videos every other day or whatever. And then I realized, like, oh, I've got some free time right now due to my schedule. So for a big stretch of my channel, I put out a video every single day. And then now I've slowed down to a measly one video every other day.
Yeah,
So in the span of 7 months now, I've put out 191 videos,
it's
I
impressive.
think.
Impressive. That reminds me of the old nerdarchy adage: if we can't make better videos, we'll at least make more.
Yeah. If you can't reach that quality, then just shotgun spray that out of there, and someone's gonna watch it, right?
At one point, we were doing like two regular videos a day and a live stream, and that didn't include like if we were doing any like gameplays.
Yeah, well, sometimes you gotta do what you gotta do, and I genuinely, much like you guys, I had this impression that I can't deliver quality because I don't know what quality is. So I'm gonna deliver quantity, and maybe if I make 20 videos in the span of a week, then maybe at least one of those videos will get some views. So
Well, first of all, I'm not saying that you don't put out quality. I'm saying that
I'm
was
saying
our
I don't
motto.
know if I put out quality.
I wouldn't make that accusation. But for any content creator, really, like I think the goal should be to put out as many videos as you can early on to kind of get the feel for making videos, right? Like you're
For
gonna have to
sure.
put out bad videos before you can put out great videos for most
Yeah.
people. I
Yeah,
mean,
you got to crawl before you can walk, and you got to walk before you can run. I've seen some people, for example, being web DM. Those guys, like their very first video was already a banger, and several other major YouTubers. I couldn't imagine doing that though. I don't have the technology, I don't have the
yeah.
know how, I don't have the personnel, I don't have any of that. So
I know
I
when I watched my first WebDM video, I'm like, you can use more than one camera?
yeah.
This is madness, I tell you. So, we were talking a little bit beforehand, and you're kind of a little bit newer to D&D.
Yeah, I've only just been nerding for 4 years now, and I've realized for all my life that I'm a nerd. I just never really had the opportunity. But 4 years ago, found myself with some nerds, and I actually begged, pleaded, and eventually convinced someone to run a D&D game for me, and that. And it took me basically a month of harassing this guy and saying, "Run a game, run a game, run a game." And he finally did it, and that was so great because that's what led me to running the dozens of games that I have run now and running for all the hundreds of people I've ran for, and of course eventually starting my YouTube channel.
How how long were you playing before you started GMing?
I probably around 6 months or so. I got a feel for it. I started playing, and eventually around of some time after playing, I started watching other people play, and then I realized D&D doesn't mean one thing. D&D means so many different things to so many
Yeah.
different people. You've got, of course, the critical roles that are super duper role play, and then you have the grognards that want to bash skulls and don't care about that. I like the fact that you can sit down at a table and create and pander the game to whatever you want. And then eventually I started running those games where I started pandering to different people's wants and needs.
What is your play style like? What is your preferred?
I don't have a preferred. I can do everything. A perfect example being this very week, I ran a Curse of Strahd game that was very role play intensive and tragic and sad and fun, and there wasn't any combat at all. And then just yesterday, I ran a game where I killed two PCs and I killed like nine retainers or something like that. So I can definitely run, mixtures of the both. And I truly do sit down to each individual table and run a different game for them depending on what they want.
That's the great aspect of the game too. Is enjoying it different ways. I find it really sad when people are like, you can't play it this way or you can't play it that wrong.
You need to
There's a
play it
wrong
my
way.
way.
Yeah. And whatever whatever that way is, because there's so many different ways to enjoy the game, like you said. And I think the only thing that you really have to do is everyone just needs to be on the same page, and then you can play whatever style you want to play, and everyone that wants in on that game can play it, and those that don't can sit out. And that I think that's like the key. It's not like enforcing your style of play on a group unknowingly.
Absolutely. That is an unfortunate thing where we didn't see these session zeros until semi recently, but
Yeah,
now it's become a lot more mainstream. But you should sit down even before that session zero theoretically and say, "Hey, I'm going to run a game," and you either tell the people what kind of game it is or you ask them what kind of game you want to run for them. And you put out ahead of time this flyer of, "I'm going to be running, a super deathly mega dungeon." Then hopefully the people that want a super role play game don't show up to the table, right?
yeah, yeah.
And then vice versa. If you're running a super role play heavy game, then hopefully the people that want to, bash skulls don't show up because they'll be bored out of their gourd.
Both will be bored either way. So Rivers RPG wants to know: have you tried older editions?
Yes. In fact, I just recently have been delving into Advanced Dungeons and Dragons, and I also have played a bit of third edition, specifically third edition, not 3.5, which is the
Yeah,
go-to, but I wanted to try out the actual third edition to see what all the hub's about. And I see what people talk about with third edition. I
yeah,
see it.
yeah. I don't even remember what the difference was between third and 3.5.
What 3.5 ended up adding was basically just a lot more features. It cleaned up some things. There were some broken mashups. Like there's like a ranger combination where you can attack like a huge number of times in a round, and just a whole bunch of fun stuff.
Yeah, I've been playing since first, and I've kind of played through all the editions. I've been like the bane of my group for all of time, I think, because I would drag them all kicking and screaming into the newest edition. I don't know. I just like D&D, and I like seeing the different iterations of it. And I would always
Yeah.
get pumped and excited for whatever was coming next.
Yeah, that's the interesting thing is when you look at other game systems, you look at, let's say, Call of Cthulhu. The difference between Call of Cthulhu first edition and seventh edition is literally just tiny number changes. But when you look at D&D, each edition is truly a different game. And, it is exciting to see that new change to the game. And, undoubtedly every single time anybody posts up a sixth edition here, video, those, get a ton
Yeah.
of views and stuff. And it will be interesting to see how the game changes from here on out, because now D&D truly has seen more growth in the past few years than it has ever seen ever. So
Yeah, I don't know what a 6E is going to look like and how they're going to do it, because there's such a divide from third to fourth.
oh yeah.
And fourth, commercially was kind of a flop in comparison to all the other editions. And 5E, they've been riding the popularity for a while. So I just don't know. I don't know if we've peaked yet or not. Well, no, I think we'll know when we see a new design team come in, or if it gets sold off to another company.
Yeah, well, I mean, definitely Hasbro wants D&D to succeed, because they're a business and businesses are about making money. So they definitely want to see succession, but I don't want to see D&D peak. I don't ever want to see it plateau. I want to
Yeah.
see D&D continue to rise forever and all the time. D&D is such a unique game in that it's not like Call of Duty where you're going to pick up the next edition, a year later, and it's not like
It
a
doesn't
movie
end,
where
right? It's in some
yeah,
ways D&D is such a terrible business model,
it
because you don't
is.
really, like, after you get the three core books, you don't really need anything else. And
If you are creative, you could just pick up the SRD. You don't even
yeah,
need the book if you want to go that extreme. But
yeah,
but the thing is too is I've been talking a lot with all the other content creators, is the fact that you also don't see this level of community content. The rise of Kickstarters and DM's Guild, Drive Through RPG, the fact that the community is now pumping out more content than Wizards of the Coast for D&D is astounding, and we're getting some awesome content from it. And that's totally awesome.
yeah. I mean, it's funny you mentioned that, because just like internally, one of us just shared the Runes of Symbarom Kickstarter that's going on now, which is like closing in on 300,000. That's from
Yeah.
Free League, and it's like just an adaptation to 5e. So, mentioning all the creators out there, and it's good to see. Like, it's good to see it growing as a viable business for companies, because like, you can love something and do it as a hobby, but the chances that it'll stay around are never is not very good. Like, it needs to be viable and make sense in other
Yeah.
aspects of your life.
Yeah, that's what I was talking about, right? Is the fact that you don't see this with other communities. Like, you don't see a game company that makes DLCs for Call of Duty, right? Like, that's
Yeah.
not a thing. But you have D&D, and we are seeing multiple either large or small companies now doing these Kickstarters, which are earning hundreds of thousands of views each, and that's just totally awesome to me. And we're
Uh,
seing more
Better
and
than
more.
views, dollars.
Well, yeah, that's the important thing. Is it's not just the views, it's the how about the pledge, right? So I love to see that.
Yeah. Fry minis. Can someone please buy No Fun Allowed a chair?
Yes. So as astute people notice, I do in fact sit on the ground like a mongoloid. I've got this couch right behind me, but unfortunately, due to my gaming setup, I just physically can't sit down on it. There's no way. I don't have a table. I don't have a PC monitor. I actually have a TV, so I don't have a TV stand. Or yeah, my TV stand is like on the opposite side of the room.
Yeah.
So it just, unfortunately, my setup is just not built for YouTube. It's great for watching TV, but this whole sitting down thing kind of sucks.
You have to grow into it, man. One day you'll get a chair. How many subscribers does it take for you to buy a chair?
Yeah, maybe that'll be my stretch goal, right? Maybe it's like the 10K chair special or something. Who knows? Who knows?
Make this huge production of you like setting up the chair and then sitting in the chair, and then you end the live stream.
it's one of those things, right? I gotta get it piecemeal, right? I've gotta get a PC monitor. I've gotta get the stand for it. I've gotta get,
Yeah.
the table. It's just so much work. It's so much effort. It's just so I gotta rearrange all my cables. That's gonna be a pain. Ugh, cable
Well, it could be
management for
worse.
it.
Like I think we had Crit Crab on, and he's like a real young guy. Uh, and he was living in a van when he started his YouTube channel.
Heck yeah.
So he's like a van person. So now
Mobile
he's
game
YouTube
setup. That
famous.
sounds awesome.
But you'll get there. It's just a matter of time.
That's that eventually that's a cool story to tell. It's like I'm
Yeah,
here now. You can't handle me at my worst, then you don't deserve me at my best, kind of thing.
for real. So, do you like running other games outside of D&D?
Absolutely. It's important to get a healthy mindset when you look at D&D. As much as I love D&D, it's my introduction to role-playing games. I've run it more than anything else. I do love running other game systems because you truly get to appreciate what you like about the game system. And then you can also learn that maybe your game system doesn't have everything you want. For example, being Call of Cthulhu. Call of Cthulhu does horror great. I don't think 5e does horror great because you're a superhero that does superhero things, and there's not any built-in mechanics for it. So that's one aspect of it. And then I run old school essentials, and then you know you're worrying about your life every second because the skeleton can hit you one time and then you die because you drop 0 HP, you die. You know, it's important to look at these other game systems because it truly does make you appreciate what you love about whatever role playing system that you play.
No, I agree. It gives you a different perspective, and also sometimes like you want to play D&D, but you want to look at it through a different lens. So a new game can do that for you. But also sometimes you just want to play something that's not D&D and it's built to do the thing that you want to do, and you don't have to jump through any hoops to do it. Like you mentioned horror. Horror is a great example of, I feel like it's the hardest genre to run with D&D because you make characters that are built to kill monsters.
That's another thing too, is that does go back into that buy-in of the game. With a role-playing game, it's like, yeah, you sit down to role play. With a battle game, it's like, oh, okay, I make a character battle. But with horror, you have to truly tell your players, okay, you are going to be scared. You're going up
Yeah.
against some elder god or something. You don't just sit there and say, I roll to attack. It's like you have to everyone at the table has to participate in a believable manner.
Or if you're playing like a game like 10 Candles where like you're playing to get to the point when all the candles go out and like everyone dies.
Yeah.
Like that's like the kind of like the point of the game.
Yeah, definitely. It's one of those things where 10 candles, for example, sitting in a dark room and, slowly snuffing these things out. There's a lot of great imagery to be had with that. You can only imagine, like, okay, what's creeping out in the darkness. And then that's a metaphor for your life and all that stuff. And, absolutely fantastic stuff. That's definitely something that you don't see in D&D.
So, what convinced you to start running your own games so quickly? Because I mean, a lot of times I find people play the game for years and years and be like, I don't know if I'm ready to DM yet, But sounds like you jumped right in.
Yeah, I played the game for a bit, and then I realized, I saw these other streams, Critical Role, and whoever else I watched. My most favorite, Dice Camera Action, because I love Chris Perkins. But I realized I've got stories to tell, and I want to tell them in a number of different ways, and I want to reach out to different people. And then I started doing it. The very first game I actually ran was a kind of a motif on West Marches style, where I just said, hey, if you show up to my gaming session today, it's going to be a one shot, and you are a group of adventurers in an adventures league, and you're going on a fun little one shot. And each session was a different theme of. I remember one session was like kids were getting kidnapped by bullywugs in the swamp. Then the next one was dealing with a group of cultists that were worshiping whatever. And each one I wanted to have a different theme because I wanted to see what I could take it to. And I was running it for different people, and that added a whole variety of spice. And I love that aspect of the game. That, like I said before, it's DD means different things to different people.
Yeah, you bring up a really good point, and I think if more people looked at it that way, where people would get into GMing sooner, is the sense that you're here to tell stories and be a storyteller, and not and less so to run a game, right? I think people get wrapped up in like the game part of it and all the rules and mechanics, and they find that part intimidating.
Yeah.
Where,
Something about me is I hate rolling dice.
yeah,
Of all the things about role playing games, rolling dice is my least favorite. So a lot of times I do like to say, "Hey, what do you do?" And if it is plausible, then you do it. And if it's not plausible, then it's like, no, screw you. You can't talk the pants off the king with a persuasion check. I don't care if you got a plus 15. Screw you, right? So it's one of those
that's
things
definitely a
where
sleight of hand check.
exactly right. It's one of those things, and I like that. I like the story aspect of it a lot more than the mechanical side. For example, being I just ran some old school essentials, and combat in there is super quick, super lethal, and you want to avoid it at all cost. So in there, if you see me rolling dice and you know me as a DM, you know that me rolling dice is bad news because that means a monster might be approaching or something. So it's like, okay, we
Yeah,
got to go. We got to hurry.
it's not going to go well for somebody.
Exactly. Normally
So,
the poor retainers, but they're
so
they're just there to be a buffer.
So recently, you kind of like challenged yourself to do like the speed run of Candle Keep. What
Yes.
was that like to do?
Yeah, so I put out the call and I said, "Hey, I want to world first this because I did a really quick speed run of Icewind Dale Rime of the Frost Maiden. So I want to do a speed run of this one as well." So I put out the call and said, "Hey, I'm going to be running some one shots. Go ahead and join the Discord and whatever, and you can hop in these games." So over the course of, oh god, 8 days, yeah, 8 days, 8 days is about right. Over the course of 8 days, I had 34 players show up to the table, and I ran 2 sessions a day. Except for the very first day, I only had one session because 17 is an odd number. But
Yeah, yeah.
every other session after that was 2 sessions a day with random people. And each of those mysteries is a different theme, different setting, different tone, and it was a crazy time.
Do you have a favorite adventure from there?
Man, that's tough. They're all good in different ways. Um, I will say though, I did really, really like the level 16 adventure Xanthoria because it does high level play well. Normally, we don't see high level play from Wizards of the Coast because they're afraid to touch high level play. Um, so it was really cool to see some high level play that was actually on par with what level 16 characters could do.
There was a little of a
And
gauntlet toss there.
it's one of, well, I mean, it's no secret that Wizards of the Coast shies away from high level content. It's a
Yeah,
vicious cycle, right? So we see Wizards of the Coast avoid high level content because there is no high level content. No one plays high level content, and because no one plays high level content, no one likes it. And because no one
yeah.
likes it, they don't make it. So it's this thing, right? So
Oh,
maybe
you're
at some
saying so
point,
you're saying it's the chicken or the egg. It's not. It's not that they're not making it because people really aren't playing high level. It's people aren't playing it because they're not making it. Now I don't know because like all of our games are homebrew,
mhm,
so we rarely use official content anyway.
yeah,
So like for us that doesn't matter. But I mean, it does seem like if I go over the past 20 years of our gaming group, things tend to break down at that 7 to 11th level area,
mhm,
and whether it's just burnout, right, or whatever. But my buddy Mark used to always joke and say if we wanted to play 15th level characters, we better start at 13. Just because all of our campaigns would fizzle. Um, but all that was like pre session zero. After we started adding session zeros into our game, I feel like our games have lasted longer and have been done a better job of staying together.
yeah, for sure. The laying out those expectations, both what the players want out of the game, what the DM wants out of the game, and what you guys are actually going to be covering. Because I know that there's some DMs out there that want to be like, "Oh, I'm going to run a game, and the players aren't going to know anything about it. It's going to be all mystery all the time." Like,
Yeah.
it's like, and then it's like, okay, and then I run this campaign. It's like, okay, but what if they don't like it, right? You
or
know,
it's just tedious, right? Like definitely where the concept of we're going to play characters and you're going to all wake up with amnesia and you don't even know what you can do, and like there's some ideas that work way better in a novel or other media than it does as a game.
oh yeah. I actually did play in a game where everybody had amnesia and we didn't even have our character sheets. It was interesting. We basically just had to describe to our DM what we do,
And then you
and
figure out
then
if you're good at it or not.
yeah, we eventually had to figure out if we're good or bad at it, which was hilarious. I learned that my character was arguably the worst rolled character. I apparently had like negatives and everything, but I personally love playing inoptimized characters.
Yeah, nice. So how often are you gaming nowadays?
I run anywhere between 3 to 5 sessions a week.
Oh, nice.
Anywhere
So
between.
you're the GM in all those games.
I play in one
Okay.
right now. More often than not, I personally do prefer DMing over playing or GMing over playing. Just because I find that one, I'm not funny. So the as a player, you're expected to be funny, with a lot, palling around with everybody else. But me as the GM, I can just sit back and allow everyone else to be funny. But two, I love presenting challenges to players and not knowing what the end result's going to be. I love telling them, "Hey, you have to cross the bridge. How are you going to do it?" And I love that aspect of seeing what the outcome is going to be versus seeing what the problem is going to be in front of me. It's hmm, yeah, I prefer GMing, definitely. It's
Yeah,
I'm the forever GM, but I wear that with a badge of pride.
it sounds self-inflicted as well. So
Oh, absolutely. It's
um,
it's self-flagellation's okay, right?
whatever you're into, man, we don't kink shame here. Um, so the thing that I liked about Candlekeep was the fact that like all the pieces you could pull from that to put it in your game without even ever touching the adventures. And I mean that's what we tend to do. I'm like, if you wanted to just play like a library, as a base, like it's there, and base of operations. And also like I felt the most of the books were really thematic and cool and would make great rewards by
Yeah.
themselves without, the stories that are attached to them.
Absolutely, yeah. I'm trying to think. In most of the cases, in those things, you get to either take the book or you get to interact with the book to a major degree, and those adventures, the majority of them can be placed anywhere, right? There's some of
Yeah.
them that definitely like they rely on the theme of the region, but the
Yeah.
majority of them you could take into any world. You could just change the names of the NPCs that give you the quest and problem solved. And I truly love that aspect of that anthology. With the two previous anthologies, those were just straight up just taken from old school adventures and just updated for fifth edition. So they're a little bit harder to meander and move with. But with with Candlekeep Mysteries, you can easily put into any homebrew adventure for sure.
Do you typically run homebrew stuff or is it mostly official?
A combination. I typically do run pre-made modules, but following Chris Perkins' note, I never run these things as written. I'll take the pre-made modules and make them my own. I'll, go off the rails as it were. I'll do whatever it takes. And when I do run homebrew modules, it's typically in the form of West Marches style campaigns. Um, Something I've talked about before, but I'm not here yet, is I ran a West Marches style campaign that had 32 players, and it was just me as the DM. I ran 82 sessions, and it was all a homebrew world of hex crawling, mega dungeon exploring, and all that. And the cherry on the cake was there were 79 dead PCs by the end of it. I was so close to getting it one for one, so close. I couldn't get there though.
You failed. In the end, you
It
failed.
was unfortunate.
That is
Unfortunate.
awesome. Do you have advice for anyone that wants to run um, official content on how to make it their own?
First step is join those communities, join the discords, join the subreddits, talk to people, because what's better than one mind? A hive mind. every single one of us, in those discords, because there's a discord for every single one of the pre-made modules and also the settings and all that. Huge communities. Talk to them, and you'll get to see what works and what doesn't work. For example, being Rhyme of the Frost Maiden just came out recently, and a ton of people are grabbing the book and saying, hey, maybe I want to play up the horror some more. How can I do that? And then some people throw out some suggestions like, oh, you can make the world darker, and you can make the monsters do more, and da da da. The real trick, though, to making these modules your own is to question everything. Look at the storyline that's presented. For the most part, a lot of these adventures, they have a sort of railroaded nature to them. And question, does the railroad need to go straight the entire time? Can it take divots? Can you skip some interactions? Can you change the interactions around? Just question everything. And when you question the things, asking, does this NPC need to be here? Yes or no? You're going to figure out, do you like it or do you not like it? And so,
We got
yeah, that's,
a
yeah.
we got a question from the chat. I'm gonna pull out real quick for you. How do you kick off your sessions? Do you have a DM opening move to get the group's attention?
Roll initiative. I definitely do roll initiative every now and then. Something I like to do is I try and end every session with some sort of cliffhanger. Not every session, because you'd get burnt out on cliffhangers really quickly, but try and lead up to the fact that there is going to be something around the corner. Maybe someone's going to make some revelation the next session. Make sure that when your players show up to the next session, they are wanting something to happen. Make sure that as soon as that session's kicking off, they're paying attention, because there's going to be some vital piece of information. They're going to be rolling initiative. There's going to be a make it or break it point in the campaign. Someone may die, whatever the case may be. Try and make it so that the beginning is engaging, because if you make the beginning engaging, the end engaging, then you're going to get this awesome feedback loop of in between sessions throughout the week or however long it takes for you to run the next game. They're going to be wanting to show up to the next session. And the more that they want to show up to the next session, the more pumped they're going to be when they show up to the session. And the more pumped they are during the session, they are going to be outside of it, et cetera, et cetera. You want that feedback loop.
Yeah, I feel like a kindred spirit there for sure. I definitely love ending on a cliffhanger for that reason, because it gives them something to come back to. But more importantly, like, it gives you a starting point on your next session. There's no meandering, there's no nothing. Like, the thing already kind of started to happen. It's already in motion. And we're gonna do this before we can do anything else, more than
Yeah,
likely.
something I typically do during a session is I ask, all right, what do you guys wish to do? And give them like 2, 3, 4 options, whatever. I don't want to start the session with that, though. I don't want to start the session with them thinking. I want them to start the session by doing. And yeah, that goes back into several other things, but I think that doing is a lot more impactful than thinking.
Yeah,
get the
yeah, for
get the ball
sure.
rolling, as it were.
Also, sometimes I like it because I like doing it as well, because I can just like end on a cliffhanger, and like most of the time, even I don't know what's coming next. Like, I haven't thought it out. It's just whatever the players had been doing kind of led up to this moment, and then I probably kind of ad lib something from there, and then that gives me a week, a month, however, whatever the time is between games, to think about what that cliffhanger kind of meant.
Yeah, and something I strongly advise too is to talk to your players in between sessions and say, "Hey, what do you plan on doing next session?" And that'll give you a very solid basis on where to start and where to take the next session. It's very important to figure out what your players are going to do, because you might as well only prepare the things that you know that they're going to do, right? No point in trying to do like, okay, I'm going to prepare for possibilities A through Z. Screw that.
So
Just
your players hit you with a switch and bait.
well, well,
Which will happen. It's rarely intentional, but it happens.
yeah, it can happen. You got to roll with the punches for sure. You got to sit there and say, okay, I prepared for this. You're either one gonna do it or two you're gonna do it. You can
Yeah.
go down that route if you want, but it's good to allow for creative freedom. It's if it's truly, if they're not doing it out of spite, that's the important thing.
Yeah. So Twisted Tentacle in has no idea how you play so much and put out so much content. Are you superhuman?
So
I
the
added the
trick to
last part.
Well, I wish I was superhuman. The trick to putting out the content that I do is I'll record anywhere between 2 to maybe 4 videos in a day. And then I'll be able to spread that out. And then the session time, or doing the sessions, it really comes down to the individual campaign that I'm running. Some sessions that I run are only 2 hour long sessions, very simple stuff, very little prep required, very little, time taken out of my day. Some sessions are a little bit more intricate. Like, for example, I just ran a 4.5 hour session yesterday. So those are a little bit more intensive, but because I record because I can record 2 to 4 videos in a single day, then I can spread those out over time, and basically I want to be at least 2 or 3 weeks ahead of schedule.
Yeah, that definitely helps for sure. Wally DM wants to know: do you have a favorite 5e module?
Do I have a Tomb of Annihilation right here? Keep that bad boy with me everywhere.
Is it because
Tomb
of
of
dinosaurs?
Annihilation. Yeah, absolutely. Tomb of Annihilation, it covers the 3 pillars so beautifully. It goes over exploration of an amazing jungle. It's got the role play of amazing NPCs that you get to bounce off of, both good line NPCs and evil line NPCs. And there's amazing comments to be had. It is a combination of 3 amazing old school modules all mishmashed into one that works incredibly well. And I truly find that Tomb of Annihilation is just such a beautiful, beautiful piece of work.
I really enjoy the way they, even though I don't really use them, the way 5e, when they come out with a different adventure, it covers a different part of the game. Like Tomb of Annihilation, you're getting some hex crawl stuff going on. Mad Mage is all dungeon crawl, pretty much, and it just you just cover different aspects, of the game and that's why I actually like getting those things for that
Yeah,
for those tidbits to add to the homebrew stuff we do.
for sure. Yeah, there's a lot to be learned about making your own adventures by looking at these things because like I said, TOA, hex crawl, Mad Mage, dungeon delve, Waterdeep Dragon Heist, a actual city adventure.
Yeah.
Baldur's Gate, not an actual city adventure. It's
Yeah.
it's one of those things where you can look at all of these and once again, much like looking at other game systems, looking at other modules lets you infer what kind of adventure you actually want to run. Do you want to run a hardcore intensive hex crawl of life and death, or do you want to run a happy-go-lucky sunshine and rainbows game where you're bouncing around with fun NPCs in a city? You can definitely infer what style of play both you and your players want.
I was kind of surprised earlier when you mentioned having to hound the DM to run Dungeons and Dragons for you. I feel like most of us, when we find like a new player that's interested but's never played, we're like chomping at the bit to get that person into a game to make them one of us.
He was admittedly busy at the time. He was a full-time manager of a Blood Bowl league, and he was doing a bunch of other things, and he was running some other games as well at the time. And I just said, "Hey, I haven't played D&D. I need to play D&D. Let's go, let's go." And then he eventually succumbed, and it was phenomenal. That in fact was actually Out of the Abyss, one of my other most favorite modules. Not quite on par with TOA, but a really good module in my opinion, just horribly structured in regards of the actual layout.
I
But
liked Out of the Abyss for all the tidbits about the Underdark that was stuffed in it
mhm.
for when I was running an Underdark game.
Yeah, yeah, it's definitely it's funny. Over the course of time, we've seen the modules have different ideas of what they want to be. We've had some that are clearly, setting, like for example, being Waterdeep Dragon Heist. Waterdeep Dragon Heist has a ton of pages that are all about running the city, what the city's actually like, and then you have Descent into Avernus, where it's got a bunch of setting on hell, and then you've got adventures like Storm King's Thunder, where it doesn't delve into any one location. It just talks about the world and gives you a whole bunch of, different locations to delve into. So the idea of what an adventure actually gives you has always been changing, which has been for the good or worse sometimes. You just got to know what you're getting into when you're getting them.
The chat is chomping at the bit to ask you questions, man.
Oh, let's see them.
Twisted Tentacle in. What's your preferred method to prep for a session? How much of it do you do?
Alrighty, so the trick to prepping a session is never over prep, because you'll dash your own expectations inevitably. My preferred method to prep for a session is to one, ask my players what they want to do, two, look at what they could reasonably do, and three, throw a monkey wrench in there. I never want my players to always get what they want every time. I am no fun allowed, after all. So I always have to sit there and think to myself, okay, there's items within their reach. How the heck am I going to make it so that they don't get that right away? Or at least they have to overcome some sort of challenge. So when it comes to actually prepping that, I have to come up with a plausible, reasonable thing. It could be that antagonist NPC shows up and duels them for it. It could be, yeah, they fall into a pitfall and then they spend 10 minutes trying to wrestle their way out of that or whatever. In regards to actually prep, though, I sit down with online. I have notes, and I just simply write down a few keywords on things that I want to see out of the session, things that potentially could happen in the session, and things that I want to definitely foreshadow for the future. Very simple stuff. I don't want it to be pages long. These are literally sentence long of, okay, I need to foreshadow that in 2 sessions time, this villain's going to appear. How do I foreshadow that? And just like write down 1-2 sentences at most. Very simple stuff.
That alone may take up hours as your players agonize as to what your foreshadowing meant.
That's the thing is I've I've truly found over time is, what takes you minutes is going to take your players hours, right?
Yes.
And then vice versa. You prep for hours and hours, and then your players
Minutes.
blow through. Yeah, exactly. So it's just, I found that, less prep, less is more. Less is more.
Yeah, it's a tricky tightrope to walk at times. I ran a game Saturday, and they're kind of being stalked and hunted, and these creatures leaving them messages, and it's like they're spending way more time than I thought, like trying to figure it out and agonizing over it. So every little thing that you add into the game. Yeah, and it's usually like the small details, right? Like the big picture stuff. I watch it fly over the players' heads every time. But little details, they like latch onto them and like, okay, this is what we're doing this session.
Wait, what size shoes? I thought we were chasing someone that had size 11. This is size 9. What is going on?
High heel boots. Yeah,
exactly right.
For sure. So Brian and Todrick's kind of have similar questions here, or at least they're both pertaining to traps. One is, how do you describe the room with traps without giving it away entirely or making it excruciatingly slow? And the other is, what's been your favorite trap to describe a specific scene your players went through?
Oof. Okay, so how to describe a room with a trap in it is, when it comes to traps, there comes the line of the obvious traps, the not so obvious traps, and essentially imperceivable traps. So when it's the obvious trap of, okay, there is a pitfall right in front of your players, then your players are going to see that pitfall, and you just describe to them, okay, you see that there's falls 10 feet and you don't see anything else. But if you've been playing with me, then you know that there's something else to the trap. There's going to be another pitfall behind it, or there's going to be a tripwire right there.
Yeah, or you're going to jump over it because you probably easily do it, and there happens to be a visible plane of force there.
Exactly, something along those lines, right? So when it comes to those, you have to describe the room as, one, use the 5 senses. Don't describe it as like some god view mode of top down, like some of the modules sort of do when you arrive to a room. Think about describing it from exactly their viewpoint, what they see, hear, smell, taste, touch, all that fun stuff, because that is going to infer what they know. Do they smell anything? That's an important thing. If there's acid at the bottom, or more importantly, if they smell acid and they don't see acid, then they're going to be thinking, okay, there's obviously something here, right? Something along those lines. And making sure that it's from their viewpoint is definitely the way to go. When it comes to the not so obvious traps, like, okay, it's just a hallway, then just describe it as a hallway. If your players are genuinely curious about traps, then they'll spend the time searching for traps, or they'll tell you that they're searching for traps. You'll have them roll for traps. Never allow your players to roll for anything ever on their own. Always require that they roll. But when it comes to those, yeah, just reward that active participation. Or if you just want to have it be that they're always on alert, then just roll perception and or investigation and tell them if they find it or not. Simple as that. And when it comes to the imperceivable things, then make sure that it didn't seem unfair. Make it always seem like the players could have seen it, but they just didn't do the right thing.
Yeah.
Why didn't you take your 10-foot pole out? Why didn't you put the iron piton, right there in the wall and try and lift up the grate or whatever? Always make it seem like there is a way to overcome it, because once your players get creative enough, then you have to double back and get more creative to, challenge them. And that's a fun time.
And what is your favorite trap?
Whew, what is my favorite trap? That's a tough one. I've had some good ones. There is the classic, the players walk and the party gets split right down the middle, and monsters come from either end. That's a really fun one because that rewards the people that smartly configure the group, versus if you have all the tanks in the front and the squishies in the back, then the squishies get dunked on. That's just a classic go-to one. You can have that one be a solid wall, and thus no participation on either side. You can have it be a portcullis, so if either side wraps up, then they can try and help out the other side. Other fun traps, the classic mimic inside of a chest, because the players check outside of the chest, but when they open the chest, that's when there's another chest inside, and then they touch that, and that's the mimic, right?
No one expects the mimic inside.
No one expects the mimic inside of the chest. Other favorite trap. Funnily, yeah, I'll say it's one of the traps in the Tomb of Annihilation, but I'm not going to reveal that for spoiler sakes.
Nice. My favorite trap wasn't a trap. Like, I just described this slope that was going to be a little bit challenging, and they would just have to, like, literally all they had to do is be like, they could have come up with anything. I'm like, that's fine. And, it was more flavor than anything, but no. What do they want to do? They're like, we want to ride our shields down this, the Gola style. And it did, like, more damage to them than most of the things in the dungeon from this thing that they just wanted to try and do. From them trying to have to try and make, like dex checks to turn the shield to make it, because it was a spiral down. So yeah, my favorite trap has been not a trap at all.
That's honestly the thing, right? Is the biggest traps aren't the the save or die ones that are directly in front of your players. The biggest traps are, there's a door, and then your players spend the next 27 minutes try the various ways to open the door when they could have just opened the door the whole time. Right?
Yeah, it was like, I don't know, turn the knob.
Yeah, it's not magical. There's no wires around it. You don't feel any pressure plates. Just open the door. It's like, but what if? No, just open the door.
Yeah. And then at that point, then you want to make it something just because they spend so much time.
At some point, it's like, okay, you guys want something, I'll give it to you.
So, Fry Mini's favorite magic item to give to your players, other than the deck of many things.
The deck of many things is a great one. Last time I gave that out, it was great. I basically had this genie show up, and the genie said, "Hey, all of you guys can pull a card right now. Speak now, forever hold your peace." And then everyone was like, "Oh, we got to do it." So the first person that pulls a card immediately gets 50,000 gold, and they're like, "Yeah, this is awesome."
That's
and then
the best too, right?
And then the next person pulls a card, and then they get like experience to level up to the next level, and they're like, "Oh, this is awesome." And then the next person pulls a card, and then it's like, okay, there's a devil that wants to make your life miserable, and he's like, "Oh, that sucks." And then the next person pulls a card, and then their soul gets sucked out. And then the next person pulls a card, and now they have an avatar of death to one-on-one. So, classic stuff, that deck of holding, or deck of many things. Um, favorite magical item. I do love me a rock of gravity detection. That's a classic one. I love to give that out to my players because
Rock of gravity detection.
yeah, it's a very very smart object, right? You test to see if there's gravity. Very magical, right? Um,
Yeah.
I've given out a Vorpal Dagger, which is I think a very hilarious way to balance out the dagger, or Vorpal anyway, because the dagger sucks. It's only a D4 of damage, and there's no magical damage tied behind it, so it's only a D4 plus your strength or dex or whatever. But when you get that crit, you get to decapitate something. So it's like, do you want to sacrifice damage for the potential to decapitate someone? It's like, that might be worth it. And another fun magical item to give out is bag of beans. Bag of beans is a hilarious one too.
Bag of
Bag of
beans is a
beans.
good one. So have
Bag of
many
beans is just a
player
clown
fights
fiesta.
broken out over that rock of gravity?
The rock of gravity detection. So I give it to every single one of my groups. I hope none of my future players are watching this, but it's one of those things where I give my players and I tell my players, okay, this rock is magical, but you don't know what it is, and eventually they either get it identified or they try and test it out using various means or whatever. And I tell them you can't attune to it; it's that magical, and then they get this rock of gravity detection. And the thing is well, yes, it's obviously just a rock. I do have it. I do occasionally in my campaigns have a gravity like trap where if you walk into the room, then all of a sudden, something is going to flip you around or turn you upside down or whatever. So giving my players a rock of gravity detection is foreshadowing that at some point there may be a gravity spell. Obviously, most people are just going to yeet the thing and say, oh, this is BS, yada, yada. But the fact that I'm giving them, that kind of heads up, I think is really cool. I think it is important that if you come up with some funny magical item, whether this be, a joke like the rock of gravity detection or something serious like, I don't know, like a helm of telepathy or whatever, I think it's important that you make an encounter that shows off how awesome that item is, because that'll make them feel special and cool once they actually get to use it.
That makes sense. I mean, yeah, if you give them a specific magic item, or actually, if you introduce anything into the game specifically, it should come up. It should mean something at some point and add to the game.
Yeah.
So you mentioned of all the games you're playing, you're actually you're a player in one of them. What are you playing?
I am playing in a Rime of the Frostmaiden game. So I regularly play in my buddy's game, and it's funny because I DM all these games, so I know everything. And in fact, I put out the most extensive, video series on Rime of the Frostmaiden, so I do know practically everything about that thing. So I actively avoid metagaming by playing a side character. I play a terrible character. For this in particular game, I decided to do 5e hardcore mode where I rolled 3d6 down the line. And that was my stats. I couldn't arrange anything, just 3d6, not 4d6, dropped the lowest. So my highest stat was a 13. My low stat was a 6. My stats are terrible. I got 9 strength, 9 dex, 10 con, something. My highest stat was charisma with 13. So I'm a warlock with 13 charisma, and I don't have Eldritch Blast. So I'm more of a burden on the party in regards of actual combat, but what I add to the game is my secret is impacting the game, and also my stupidity because I have a 6 intelligence. My character basically actively gets into dumb scenarios that help fuel the fire, as it were.
So they're to complicate the adventurers' lives.
It's good because that game has 7 players in it, and I definitely didn't want to add to the CR ratings of a lot of encounters. My character is practically worthless. I've only got a +3 to hit right now, so I typically don't hit anything ever. I don't have Eldritch Blast, so I don't have damage. I'm a warlock, so I've only got 2 spells. Yada yada, this and that. So I'm not adding to the disparity of the game. In regards to the combat, but in the role play, I add, a uniqueness that a lot of people get to bounce and riff off of.
So Todrix wants to know, first time DM issue. You give out items and such, but you find your players are marching through fairly easily. How would you do to ramp up difficulty? So that sounds like maybe things have gone a little Monty Hall, and then
Yeah.
how do you pull it back?
So one is you could handle this in game and just beef up HP. If they do more damage, then all of a sudden they have more health. Go figure, right? If your players have higher AC, then all the monsters all of a sudden have more plus to hit, right? Simple as that. You can't easily handle it in game in that way. You can also just talk to your players and say, hey, I am a first time DM, and unfortunately, I made a air quote mistake. It doesn't necessarily need to be a mistake. Talk to your players about it. Maybe they like that Monty Hallness, right? Maybe they like the fact that they're these crazy, overpowered, superheroes, and you tailor the game to that. Or maybe your players say, okay, we recognize that and we understand, so let's dial it back. Maybe the items get nerfed, maybe the items get stolen, maybe some in-game world event happens that negates whatever is going on. I think there's a lot of organic ways to deal with it.
Also, you can always introduce problems that those magic items aren't going to help solve,
Yeah.
right? Like if if they have a lot of gear and it's making combat really easy. Well, if you introduce political intrigue or that they need to be diplomatic about something and they can't just beat their way to a win, all of a sudden that stuff doesn't matter anymore. Like they have to think, they have to role play. Maybe they have to use some other skills, but you can kind of work your way around those and add difficulty and challenge to the game by challenging them in different ways.
Yeah, not everything needs to be beaten down by a fist, right? Like there should be a lot of counters that your players cannot beat up. Fireball is not the solution, people.
Despite what Jacob says. uh, so Kakari says this might have been asked, but just joined. Favorite interesting monster to use? Do you have a favorite monster?
Favorite monster? Ooh, favorite monster. I do a very I wouldn't say a good job. I don't want to toot my own horn here, but I do like to thumb through those books and use something that I know my players haven't gone up against. I do like to throw in a variety of things, but obviously you have to have those go-to classics. You have to have beholders. Beholders are one of my most favorite monsters. Can't run them all the time, of course, because then it get real quick. But I love me some beholders because they are truly the deadliest monster in the game if run correctly. It really comes down to the environment that you're in. Beholders shut down all the magic. Beholders can easily pick off the melee people. The melee people can't do anything if the beholder's floating 15 feet up in the air. Really, the only thing the beholder has to worry about in a certain environment, it would be the ranged people. But of course, they could just start peppering them with petrification rays and whatever else. So I do think, beholders are just a fun, crazy monster because your players have to truly step up their game. It's not something, once again, it's not something you can just beat up, right? It's not something you can just cast fireballs at. You have to get creative. Another go-to monster I probably would think is I think I purposely just go out of my way to try a variety of things.
Yeah, I like to mix it up as well. I really like chokers for some reason. Um, which they appeared. I forget which book they appeared in at this point, but from earlier editions, I one of the players ran away from a combat because it wasn't going well for them, and they ran into a different unexplored area of the dungeon, and they got ambushed by a choker. And well, chokers are going to choke, and they got choked to death later. And then I don't even know if the rest of the adventuring party ever found the body. But they're just like so creepy, and the fact that they're like halfling sized, but they can choke and grapple much larger opponents, and they're all like, and they're apparitions too. So like apparitions are kind of
just
fun.
freaky stuff.
Yeah. But, you know, a lot of like carrion crawlers have always been a fun like low level monster. I love like Grix and Grell. Just like like that creepy stuff, like you said, for sure. So we are at the hour mark. Want to final thoughts before we head on out?
I do subscribe to the philosophy of making your players' lives miserable, and no fun allowed is definitely a benchmark. No, no. In regards of running the games, as we talked about before, it is all about setting those expectations. It's all about telling your players, I'm going to run this style game, or setting up the game and saying, hey, what do you want to play in? You got to make sure everyone's on board. You yourself as a DM or a GM, you are a player as well. You aren't just some foreign weird entity. You're enjoying on the participation as well. So there's no point in running a game if 4 players are having fun and then your life is miserable, right? Like that sounds miserable. So
who would do that? As always, links are in the description. Click away, go follow No Fun Allowed. It's Monday, so we've got another video up talking about draconic options over on the main channel for the new UA that just came out. Thanks for coming on, and until next time, stay nerdy.
Thank you.
And we're out.